Hello everyone, Randy here. I wanted to share one of my Jag projects that I'm trying to wrap up at this point. This car has a brand new rebuilt motor in it, and it probably took me 150 to 200 hours to put this engine together. And it's challenging, but I kind of feel like if you learn how to do it, anybody can rebuild one of these engines. It's just learning how to do it and finding out the most information you can, and also just having the right tools and having patience. Now, I wanted to share some issues I had with this engine as far as getting the thing hooked up. Now, as you can see, it's a plumbing nightmare. So, it takes a long time to kind of figure out, what goes where. I can say if you're doing this for the first time, you want to take a huge amount of pictures and document everything before you endeavor on this process, because if you don't, you're not going to remember where stuff goes back to. Now, I'm very lucky in that I have another 9,000 mile original car here that needs sat in a barn for probably 30 years and needs some body work, as you can tell. But it's pristine as far as how everything came from the factory. It's a super low mile car, and I can run over this car, look and go, oh, that's where that goes, because I don't even remember everything. I mean, you're putting these cars together, and it's just a huge project and a huge process. So another thing I did on this car, especially with the new motors, I like to run Evans fluid. Now, the problem with Evans fluid is it will leak out of everything. You think you got that hose clamp tight, forget about it. You have to double down on everything. In fact, I'm going to be switching to high torque hose clamps because I went to pour 4 gallons of Evans into this engine, and wouldn't you know it, the leak started. Lower radiator hose, it was tight. The clamp was tight, but there was a steady drip coming out of there. And the lower radiator hose, I tell you what, that is one of the hardest spots on this car to get to. And I fought with that for a few hours, and you can't even see it down there. It's just buried. It's way down there. Anyways, I managed to tighten up some more the clamp that was down there to the point of it just stripping, and then it still wasn't stopping leaking. So then I added another clamp behind it and tightened that down to the point of stripping. The dripping slowed down, but it did not stop. So what I'm going to have to do is drain the Evans coolant back out, and I'm going to use RVT cement, and then I actually, in my inventory, found this super high torque, thick hose clamp. I'm going to buy some more of these. And if I use Evans, everything's getting high torque hose clamps, and likely a little bit of RVT cement on the inside of the hoses before they slide over their connectors, just because it is such a hassle once you have the motor back together. Now, the reason I use Evans wireless coolant is every motor I've ever tore down, Jag V12, is severely corroded inside. It's just because of the nature of the motor, electrolysis, the fact there's dissimilar metals inside there. But what happens is the corrosion will inevitably gum up the radiator, all that junk going to the radiator, and then your car starts getting hot. You don't realize it. And then the fatal blow is these cars like to drop their valve seats, because the valve seats are basically, I think they're cast iron, and they're just they're sitting in the head, in the aluminum head, and what they do is they just, I think, cool the head off really cold, and the valve seat will just drop in. Well, that's great. They're compression in there when the engine's cold. When you get over 220 degrees, there's just enough to where that valve seat might fall out. So what happens? Your valve seat drops, your piston hits your valve and your valve seat, and extreme damage happens to the motor, and you might as well pull the motor out and take it to the junkyard. I've pulled some motors apart that dropped a valve seat, and the damage is catastrophic. About the only thing you can use out of those motors is you can reuse the block most of the time. What happens is chunks of metal actually ricochet through the intakes and all around, and they get in. If it stays running long enough, you get metal and damage and dang near every cylinder. It's incredible. What else was I going to talk about? So Evans actually prevents any of that corrosion happening. So you're not going to go up your radiator. Your engine is going to stay cool. It's just initially getting it to where it doesn't leak out of the engine is just a tough deal. So next problem I have with this car, which is really irritating, I put a brand new starter on it and, mounted it up before I put the engine in, because for those of you, you can kind of see the starter down there where the light is. For those of you who have had to do a starter on one of these V12s, it is incredibly hard. You have to drop, the exhaust manifold on the one side, the downpipes. I'll show a picture of a downpipe right here. It's kind of got junk on it, but that's a downpipe. You got to get that out. Half the time, the nuts on the downpipe are, they're just completely corroded and impossible to get out. So you got to drop that downpipe. You got to unhook it from the exhaust, and then you can get to the starter. And there is I think a 6-star bolt up there that's probably 11 millimeters. I don't remember. I used 11 on this one. But you got to use a couple extensions, a wobbly socket, and half the time you can't see it, so you got to shove it up into the bell housing to get to that upper bolt for that starter. And I've fought with it for hours sometimes trying to get that top bolt out, to get that starter out. It's just horrible. This one I'm lucky. I haven't hooked the transmission up to the body yet, so I was able to lower the engine down a little bit and get better access, but I was still just so irritated. Brand new starter. Let's talk about starters. Here's the new starter right here, and I put my last new starter in a friend's car a month or so ago, so I didn't have another starter. So I'm like, oh man, what am I going to do? I don't want to wait 2 weeks to get another starter, order a starter. So I like to keep any starter that, I pull out and replace with a new one. I keep all the parts. So I was able to take a starter, tear it apart, check everything, lube it up, free the brushes up, make sure they had plenty of brush left on them, or you just replace the brushes altogether. What I'm talking about brushes are these little carbon things right here that have a spring on them, and they ride on the armature right here and provide power to the thing to make it work. So I just take these, I find good parts. This is a gear reduction starter, so you can see it's got 3 gears that go in here that drive it, and these are pretty cool little things. They're much lighter than the big fat old Lucas starters. But what I find is you can see how dry that is in there. That's what they're usually, when they're starting to fail, it's because they just run out of lube, they get hot. But like I said, I was able to put a starter together. I tested it on that battery before I put it in, because I'm not going to make that mistake again. And then I'll show you, if I can get up in here. There's the rebuilt starter, ready to go. And it's always fun to hook up those wires. It's can sometimes be a real bear to get to them. And half the time, the smaller wire that actually triggers the starter, sometimes they're always, I swear, they're always different hookups, different years. So then you got to put the right hookup on it. But I got it in. I just hooked the battery back up and bumped it over, and this starter, the one I just fixed on my bench last night, works just fine. So this starter is good to go. Now I just got to put all the exhaust system back on this car, and mount the transmission. And well, I see we're still dripping over there. I saw Evans drip. Perfect. Gonna have to figure that out, and then get this back together and start it up for the first time. I'll record the startup. If it embarrassingly blows up, I might still show it. You know, you never know on these engines. You think you do everything right, and if something's wrong and you didn't catch it, you know, even a seasoned professional can fail on these engines.